Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and in the spirit of the trees and all of nature and all living things, I want to welcome you to this 425th session of Humanity Rising. Today, I'd like to start with something that came across Twitter today about the Ukrainian invasion and war that I found profoundly moving. You know, when we are watching the news, we're contemplating geostrategic issues of NATO expansion and Russian resistance and what Putin is doing and the mobilization of convoys and bombings, and we're mesmerized by the destructiveness of war, the fog of war. But it's important, I think, as we will in just a minute here, take in the poignancy of the intimacy of war. What I'd like to just show you, just that lasts for about a minute, is a little video that came across Twitter of some Ukrainians talking with a Russian soldier. You've heard the news that there's this massive convoy of Russian troops and military hardware moving in, has been stalled for days as the Ukrainian resistance is stronger than the capacity of the Russians to advance. So there's all these soldiers, thousands and thousands of soldiers that are just sort of sitting around, on the highway. So what the Ukrainians have been doing is talking to them, and they're finding that they're these young 18-year-old conscripts that don't have the slightest idea what's going on or why it's going on, aren't even sure where they are. The Ukrainian foreign ministry actually this morning broadcast that any Russian soldier that's captured, if their mothers come to Kiev to pick them up, they'll let them go. And so what you're going to see is a young Russian soldier being given tea and a pastry, and then they use a cell phone to call his mother. And it's in Russian, but I just want everybody to take in the intimacy again of war. And how personal it can be.
Детей отдает под пушечное мясо. Они не знают, куда едут, они просто блукают. Вставайте, женщина, вставайте, весь мир на ноги поднимайте. Поднимайте людей. Вы видите, ваш сын жив, здоров. С ним ничего не будет, ничего с ним плохого, ничего не будет. Вставайте, поднимайтесь народом, перекрывайте трассы, дороги, мосты. Все делайте, собирали войска, молодых солдатов. Колонны разбитых стоят. Колонны ваших русских солдат разбитые в хлам стоят. Забираются, пускай уходят пацаны. Он не за что попал, он пришел, он даже не знал, зачем он шел. Сюда, к нам. Они идут по старых картах, и они блукают.
Наташ, все хорошо, Наташ, слышите? Все, говори, мама, говори.
Все нормально.
Все, Наташа, вам удачи с Богом, все хорошо. Все хорошо. Это потом уже с вами свяжется, Наташа. Все, если он сейчас жив, здоров, с вами потом свяжется.
Сейчас все вопрос решу. Детей отдает под пушечное мясо.
That's the tragedy of war. A young man who doesn't even know what he's doing, being befriended by the enemy and talking to his mother and weeping because he's powerless, small pawn in a larger game. And it's important that we honor all of the dimensions of the tragedy that is unfolding in that part of the world right now. So as we take a moment, as we always do, to center ourselves in our hearts, let us hold that little video and just through our own heartbeats, extend love to the soldiers that are invading, the Ukrainians who are befriending, the mothers who are weeping. Let us contemplate the thought today in our hearts. Wouldn't it be amazing if thousands of Russian mothers came to the Ukraine to pick up their sons? And that caused a chain reaction of compassion and sober reflection that changed the outcome and turned tragedy into transformation. Thank you, everyone. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed at the moment. Sometimes the details of life speak so powerfully to the fragility, the interconnectedness, the delicacy, and the interactivity that if we would just fill with compassion, would obviate the need for invasions and bring us together as one. What we just saw was a powerful moment of unity in the middle of carnage. And how we, as compassionate, sensitive, conscious human beings, expand that oasis with such skill and compassion that we transform the chaos into a higher order coherence. That's the challenge in our world right now. And I feel that imperative every day as we convene Humanity Rising, because that's why we're here. So I just want to thank everybody for everything that all of us are doing to make the world a better place. And it may not seem that we're making much progress, but I believe in the depths of my being that it's these small acts of compassion, a cup of tea, a bit of pastry to the enemy, that is the model for the world to come. So thank you for this moment. I'd like to now turn to our subject today, which synchronistically is a powerful theme, because we're going to dive in now to archetypal astrology and contemplate the interrelationship between the planets of our solar system and how they interact together, including our planet, in such a way that they influence human attitudes and behavior. We've talked about astrology a number of times. We've tried to stay current. It's interesting to note that the planetary alignments now with the invasion of Ukraine are strikingly similar to 2 years ago in just a couple of days, which is the beginning of the pandemic. So I want to welcome someone who's studied archetypal astrology under the two masters that generated the field, Stan Grof and Rick Tarnis. Wren Butler, who's written a number of books that he will tell us about, who is one of our doctoral students at Ubiquity University. And Stan is his major advisor. And all of you know Stan and all the programming that we've done to honor this giant amongst us. With his holotropic breathwork and archetypal astrology and many other things that are part of the Grofian legacy. So Wren, I just want to welcome you to Humanity Rising and take it from here and tell us what you know about what's happening and some of the archetypal backdrops and contextual frameworks for the poignancy of the current global moment.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. It's great to be here. I really appreciate everything you're doing, and it's wonderful to be in synergy with you and with everyone at Ubiquity University. Our hearts go out to the people suffering in that troubled part of the world, especially in Ukraine. And I will be looking at some of the astrological alignments that can shed light on this situation. So it's really great to be here. I'm reminded of a New Age expression that a friend of mine, James Cunningham, often reminds me. He says, love always wins in the end. If love hasn't won, it's not the end yet. We believe in happy endings. I believe we're hardwired because of the birth process. We went into a difficult situation and then came out the other side. We had a victorious liberation from the birth canal, from the life-threatening situation. That creates a ingrained feeling of optimism within us, that the final word about life, about experience, about existence is happy ending, of reconnection with the divine. And we can only hope that that will happen sooner rather than later. I want to recommend a YouTube channel, Archetypal News Network, ANN, we call it. My great friend and colleague, James Moran, did a talk on Vladimir Putin's transits the other day, and you may find that very interesting. So let me share my screen for a moment here, and oops, no, not that one, sorry. Excuse me. Share screen. Here we go. So I just got this weird computer virus like 5 minutes ago. It's like this Saturn Uranus moment. This is one of the astrological alignments in the sky right now is Saturn square Uranus. It can be kind of problems with technology, among other things, but also crisis management and finding solutions to those problems.
Hey, Wren, you're not full screen.
Great. Is that coming through now?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can see that?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So I just want to just do a little super brief introduction on myself. I was raised in a Mormon family. I was the oldest son in a Mormon family. Here I am on the right. There's me there with the Eddie Munster hairstyle, mid-60s. My parents left the Mormon church and started a back to the land commune in 1970. And this is about 1972. You can see quite a different feeling it had elapsed in those 6 years. I often sort of think of my life trajectory as from LDS to LSD. This is 1977. And then just super briefly, the shameless promotion part of my talk here. This is one of my books it's quite popular, Archetypal Universe, and then Pathways to Wholeness, and O Goddess. So here are the astrological transits for today. Very powerful lineup here, especially this Venus-Mars-Pluto conjunction, and then the Sun, Jupiter, Neptune over here. On the positive side, those of you who have been watching Richard Tarnas' documentary, The Changing of the Gods, will be probably in a state of rapture, spiritual inspiration over the influx of meaning that docu-series is bringing into Western civilization. This is a great moment for archetypal astrology. 10 years in the making. It was finally released last week, and Neptune is the astrological symbol for divine consciousness. It is the unified field of consciousness that underlies all things. And Jupiter amplifies that and broadens that, expands it. And the Sun brings warmth and focus on whatever it touches. So this Sun, Jupiter, Neptune triple conjunction represents like an outpouring cornucopia of meaning, of sense of connection, of reminders of what unites us. And this is one of the unexpected results of the Russian attack on Ukraine, is this sense of sort of global unity of most of the world coming together in a sense of commonality. And we want Russia to be part of that commonality. I mean, on a spiritual level, we're all the same, and we hope that this terrible time will end soon. Now, as far as the war, to me, the most significant indicators are this Venus, Mars, Pluto. Putin's transits are interesting as well. I'll just briefly mention those. James talks about this in this YouTube video that I mentioned on ANN. Transiting Saturn is in opposition with Putin's Pluto. This can bring out Terminator feelings, often like very intense, hardcore, aggressive feelings, like bearing down with intractable perseverance and sort of endurance. There can be a highly destructive side to this. I hate to bring this up, but James Cameron was born with a Saturn-Pluto alignment, and the image from Terminator 2 with the Terminators with the tank treads, grinding across the broken landscape is certainly one of the possibilities of this transit that Putin has. And I hope that he can face that energy within himself rather than acting it out upon the world. He also has transiting Jupiter, Neptune, squaring his natal Mars. That's 90 degrees from Jupiter, Neptune in the sky to Putin's Mars. The difficult side of the Neptune Mars can sometimes be like quagmire situations, like getting bogged down. It's hard to get traction with that. And at the same time, the Jupiter square Mars can bring out a kind of adventurous, like adventurism, expansionism, kind of might makes right feeling. There's certainly a shadow side to that. Now, Putin also has transiting Uranus opposition his natal Jupiter. This can lead to an inflated sense of being beyond all limits or constraints. There can be tendencies toward impulsive excess and over-optimism, or even messianic delusions. The wholeness and safety he claims to be seeking for Russia are apparently not feelings he enjoys in his own psyche. We have to reach these states of wholeness within ourselves, and the safety that comes with that when we access the numinous consciousness that is beyond death, that is eternal and infinite, the mystics describe. And this is such an important challenge for all humans to do the work to reach those states. Now, I will mention that this Saturn square Uranus transit, 90 degrees between these planetary archetypes, we can see the way that this is perceived by the vast majority of the Western world as a fight between an autocratic Samson, i.e. Saturn, and a freedom-seeking David, Ukraine, Samson versus David, between dictatorship, Saturn, and democracy, Uranus, plutocratic control, and the right of self-determination. This event has also had the unexpected, which is Uranian quality, effect of galvanizing the support of democratic people around the world against the tyranny of Putin's expansionism and dictatorship. Now, on the other side, we know that many Russians, especially older ones who lived through the catastrophic invasion by the Nazis during World War II, see this as a fight to preserve Russia against what they view as the expansionism of NATO and the West. These memories are so raw for Russians. 20 million Russians were killed, mostly civilians. Well, the majority were civilians. And so this is just 1 or 2 generations away. This is very close to the surface. They know what it's like to be invaded. However, people in Russia that feel this way are not remembering that Russia is now a nuclear superpower. There is zero chance that NATO would ever attack Russia. Also, one of the ironclad prerequisites of joining NATO is that the applicant has no disputed borders. And because Ukraine is probably not going to accept the loss of Crimea and the other eastern parts of Ukraine for a very long time, they will not be able to join NATO. So that argument is an emotional argument, but is not based in rational probabilities. Now, I'm really struck by the effect of this Venus-Mars-Pluto as well. In Mars-Pluto, Pluto intensifies the aggression, the violence associated with Mars. Both Mars and Pluto have the shadow side of violence and aggression. There's the positive sides too as well. But here we can see the massive brutality and the power trip of Putin and his oligarchs, the sort of brute force, the carpet bombing and now attacks against civilians, the 40-mile column of tanks and trucks approaching Kiev, as well as the fierce resistance and courage of the Ukrainian people and outrage around the world. This is all very much Mars-Pluto. Now, the Venus-Pluto is also strongly engaged. Venus is connected with love, harmony, beauty, friendship, and Pluto is the death rebirth struggle. It's the shadow side of the unconscious, powerful historical forces. In this hour of great danger and peril, the world's media are conveying over and over the heartfelt pleas of the Ukrainian people, the open-hearted sort of sharing of their true feelings. This is one of the qualities of Venus. There are so many scenes of couples broken apart, Venus, Pluto, or newlyweds deciding to stay and fight together. You know, they just got married and now they're both in the, you know, in the militia or the army. There are also scenes of Ukrainians sharing their passionate determination, Pluto, and love of their country through performing, singing, and dancing, Venus. You see this, there's just, it's a very artistic culture, you know, the beautiful costumes and the traditional dress and the dancing and the music and the art, and it's sort of in the service of this Plutonic struggle that we see right now. We can also see the massive outpouring of human love, Venus, and concern for the Ukrainian people against the Russian or Putin's onslaught, Pluto. In this sincere and genuine charm offensive, Putin is hopelessly outmatched. We can only hope that he comes to his senses and does not turn this debacle into a heart-wrenching bloodbath. Venus-Pluto can manifest as both a love of power, so Venus, love of power, Pluto, or as the power of love to overcome human divisions. And, you know, on a higher transcendent level, all bad things that happen in the universe are just spirit doing it to itself. There's a level where that is true. But on the human level, this is, you know, horrific level of suffering and destruction that is being unfolded right now. Venus-Mars can be, among other things, about the interplay between friends and enemies. Friends, Venus, and enemies, Mars. So two very powerful archetypal complexes coming to bear on this situation. I hope that Putin will come to his senses, come to his heart, or that you know, some of the people around him will help to persuade him that to look for a way out of this instead of pushing forward. So if I have any other thoughts about the situation, I'll mention them as I go. So my talk today is called Archetypal Astrology, the Rosetta Stone of the Psyche. So here's a picture of Rick Tarnas that I really like, about the time he published The Passion of the Western Mind. This is a picture of Stan fairly recently, Stan Grof. Now, for years, Stan and his colleagues, those of you who don't know, Stan was and remains the world's foremost researcher in psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. They had looked for some kind of predictive technique to understand the content of people's sessions in psychedelic therapy. They looked at various diagnostic techniques like the MMPI, the Personal Orientation Inventory, the Rorschach, the DSM categories, but they were unable to account for the observation that if 10 people do the same psychedelic, the same dose on the same day, they could have 10 different experiences. And if a person does a psychedelic substance on 10 different days, like a month apart, let's say, they could also have 10 totally different experiences. So it seems like the experience is not only coming from the catalyst, from the molecules of the substance. There's something else at play. So after years of frustrating search, when Richard Tarnas and Stan Grof, through a series of conversations, finally investigated the possibility that archetypal astrology could illuminate people's inner experiences, Grof had to laugh that it was the one thing that was even further beyond the pale, beyond the boundaries of scientific acceptance than psychedelics, and it was astrology. Now, many of you have probably heard Stan say that psychedelics, when used responsibly, can play a similar role in psychology and psychotherapy as the microscope in biology and the telescope in astronomy. When used in a careful and responsible way, they can give us unprecedented access to the deeper structures of the human unconscious and the superconscious at large, the universal consciousness. Grof also said at the Cycles and Symbols conference in 1990 that archetypal astrology functions as a Rosetta stone of the psyche. It's the only system that can successfully predict both the content and timing of experiences encountered in non-ordinary states of consciousness in experiential psychotherapy. So just a very brief introduction to this school of astrology. I coined the term holotropic astrology in 1990 to describe that branch of Richard Tarnas' research that looks at psychedelic and holotropic states. Most people are familiar with his work in historical cycles, his master work, Cosmos and Psyche, but he really began this working with holotropic and psychedelic states. So I think holotropic astrology is a very sort of fitting term. So this astrology that Tarnis has initiated, this school, is non-fatalistic and non-deterministic. We realize that humans have free will to work with the energies that are activated at a given time. We can act them out in the worst possible ways, or we can work with them to try to turn them toward their most life-supporting forms. The archetypes can manifest in a wide range of possible expressions while still being true to their basic thematic character. We never know exactly how a planetary archetype will manifest. We know the basic emotional flavor, the range of possibilities. There are additional factors always coming to play, such as cultural context, free will, co-creative participation of ourselves, and perhaps unmeasurable, such as karma and grace, Rick talks about. And I would like to add that the universal mind's desire for variety of experience. Our relationship with our own unconscious has a huge effect on how these different changing planetary archetypes will show up. And that's why the project of depth psychology, of exploring our psyches, of undergoing the inner archaeological quest, is so important, because the things that are inside us that we are not aware of, things in our unconscious, will really tend to run our lives from behind the scenes. And so it's very important to make those repressed memories and traumas conscious, so that they don't toxify our life experience. So Rick sums up some of the things we just were talking about as astrology is archetypally predictive rather than concretely predictive. So just a little bit about non-ordinary states, or what Stan calls holotropic states. And most of you know, he coined the term holotropic, means moving toward wholeness, holotropic. So since the dawn of history, guided non-ordinary or holotropic states of consciousness have played a central role in the spiritual and ritual life of humanity. Stretching back more than 30,000 years, the shamans of ancient cultures began their healing professions through a spontaneous or induced experience of death and rebirth. They explored these territories in a first-hand way. The territories of the psyche. In the rites of passage, initiates were guided into non-ordinary states and had a personal experience of higher realms that transcend the physical world. In the ancient mystery religions of the Mediterranean, neophytes participated in various mind-expanding processes in order to transcend the limits of individual awareness and experience directly the sacred or numinous dimensions of reality. These were experiential religions, not just hearing somebody talk about divinity, but actually having your direct connections yourself. The celebrated mother goddess mysteries of Eleusis, Greece, which were held near Athens for almost 2,000 years, we are now virtually certain used ergot, a naturally occurring form of LSD. These are the ruins. And it was based around Demeter, the mother goddess. Her Roman name was Cereal, or Ceres, rather, from where we get the term cereal. And here she's holding the grain, and the ergot grew on rye and was a psychoactive fungus, and it mediated access to the mother goddess Demeter and her daughter Persephone, the death and rebirth of Persephone. Mother and daughter were in the form of Demeter and Persephone this was the most popular branch of Greco-Roman mythology for over 2,000 years. It's very interesting that in the Christian era, it became father and son. And I believe we're now moving into an era where it will be and needs to be mother and father and daughter and son. And so many of the creative and intellectual giants of Western culture attest to the life-changing power of their experiences at Eleusis or one of the other mystery sites. A huge effect on the development of Greek and thus the entire Western civilization. So, as well as the ritual use of psychedelic substances, many cultures have used methods such as trance dancing, drumming, sensory overload and sensory deprivation, sleep deprivation, breathing maneuvers, fasting, meditation, and other techniques to enter holotropic states to reclaim our lost wholeness. So, Stan Grof, as many of you know, had the opportunity to do high-dose psychedelic sessions with voluntary patients in Prague, Czechoslovakia, and in Baltimore, at Johns Hopkins University later. He conducted over 3,000 mostly LSD sessions with patients, and through this vast amount of clinical data, he extrapolated what he calls an expanded cartography of the human psyche. And he suggests or observes that there are three broad bands in the human unconscious. The first is the biographical, and this is well known from verbal approaches to therapy. It usually focuses on events that happened from infancy to the present. This is the biographical layer. But he found that he needed to introduce two additional domains, the perinatal and transpersonal, which I will talk about in a moment. These are some of the most important categories of experience people face from the biographical layer of the psyche. I won't read all these out just for time considerations, but there are difficult ones and positive ones. We can access positive memory systems that people can forget the happy parts of their childhood, and then remembering them can bring additional therapeutic benefits. But there was a category that has not yet been integrated in any of the major psychological schools. And this was serious leftover traces from illnesses, operations, or accidents. He found that these can leave a trace in the psyche, as I said, that can be worked through and completely healed in a regressed state. Now, when people continue the inner archaeological quest, everyone sooner or later eventually begins to have perinatal experiences. These center on around birth and death, There are obstetric elements to this, remembering specific medical conditions, position of like during the actual birth, like breech birth or use of forceps type of anesthesia. And also at the same time, the human encounter with mortality and death, birth and death are mixed together in the psyche in this layer. Rebirth and transcendence, transcending the fear of death, of reawakening back to the infinite and eternal divine consciousness. Stan writes that the essential goal in transpersonal forms of psychotherapy is to open or widen the pathway to the divine consciousness. We can use a metaphor in verbal approaches to therapy. It could be likened to ladling out a swamp one spoonful at a time. In transpersonal approaches to psychotherapy, as well as working with the traumas that we have to unpack from our psyches, we're also essentially through that process digging a trench to the ocean and allowing the ocean to flood in and cleanse away the old unnecessary trauma-based structures. So Stan observed that these perinatal matrices occur in 4 clusters of experience, the perinatal experiences, which he called the basic perinatal matrices. And as I said, these have an obstetric component, but they are overlayered with powerful images from nature, from history, from past lives, archetypal and spiritual themes. And these are connected to the obstetric elements by what he calls experiential logic. So why is it that when people relive a good womb experience, that they could have images of heaven or paradise? And Stan suggests that it's because they both share an emotional quality of safety, of connection, of no boundaries, of a sense of union with the divine. The fetus has numinous feelings in a good womb situation. In the no exit stage of labor here, the uterine contractions are pressing against the fetus, but the cervix is still closed. There's experientially a sense of no exit, entrapment or encagement. And people can have images of hell when they're accessing this part of their psyche. They would both share a sense of being disconnected, of physical and emotional suffering, of loss, of a sort of darkness, and so on. So this is the experiential logic, where when you are accessing some part of your psyche, there are kind of a syndrome of different elements that can occur at that same time, which are connected by the same emotion or the same sensation. So we'll a little more in-depth look at the perinatal layer and how it connects with astrology. So in a good womb situation, there's this amniotic universe, paradisian qualities, blissful oceanic feelings, a sense of no boundaries, as I said, feelings of cosmic unity and perception of higher meaning. And Rick Tarnas was able to see that these share a very profound thematic parallel with the archetype Neptune that has been written about for 170 years or so, a bit less than that, more than 150 years. Now here is a painting by Stan Grof. He had transiting Neptune trining his natal Pluto, so a highly activated Neptune, and he had access to this good womb experience. He identified with the fetus in a state of blissful union with the entire cosmos. Images of space or of the ocean also share with the intrauterine state the quality of no boundaries. And this is a breakthrough in the understanding of dreams as well, of if you have a dream of the ocean or of space, you can almost guarantee that you will be having strong Neptune transits. It really adds additional information for understanding dreams. And psychedelic sessions are essentially like a dream that's turned up to 10 or 100 or more. These are coming from the same part of the unconscious. So here is an oceanic experience connected with Neptune and this sort of good womb experiences. People can also have toxic womb experiences or disturbances of intrauterine life under Neptune transits. If the mother was under stress or unsupported, or was using drugs or alcohol, or was sick, or imminent abortions, there can be these kinds of experiences. Now, and we know this from people who where there were attempted abortions, but they were unsuccessful and the fetus survived, and they were then able to relive that experience later. So this is from a holotropic breathwork session, In the Lap of the Goddess by Sylvina Heath. She had transiting Neptune conjunct her natal moon. Another breathwork session, Kundalini Mother, during the Great World Transit of Uranus conjunct Neptune of the 1990s. These sort of sense of openness, meaning, connection. My colleague Olena Provencher drew this for me. Jupiter Neptune. Jupiter amplifies the Neptune archetype, and I call this the womb with a view. And this is one of the things that's happening right now, this sense of grand connection. It's just a wonderful time to be doing a talk like this, or this series that Jim is hosting. So from the individual side, this is the experience of being absorbed in union with divine consciousness. There can be existence in heaven or paradise, Atman, Brahman, unity. We can access Buddha nature, the Tao, unio mystica, harmony of the spheres, the sacred marriage are some of the archetypes associated with this. These oceanic feelings are what Stan calls melted ecstasy. These are a powerful healing threshold in psychotherapy. If people can access these states, he found even for a short time that they can often enjoy great diminishment or total and dissolving of their symptoms. But most people have to work through quite a lot of baggage and trauma in order to get to these points. So from the transpersonal side, Neptune represents states of cosmic unity and wholeness before the process of involution and incarnation begins. Why does the cosmic creative principle create physical universes? And the mystics say different reasons. Overflowing love it wants to share with someone beyond itself, the creative passion of a master artist, the insatiable curiosity of a scientist, or simply cosmic boredom or loneliness. And the paraphrase from Stan's masterpiece, The Cosmic Game. So here, as I said, the early stage of labor, Stan calls this BPM2, or basic perinatal matrix 2. The cervix is still closed and there's no way out. There can be feelings of compression, constriction, and hopelessness, lack of meaning or connection. The other has become hostile here. This is a very powerful imprint of that sense of duality between I and other. And this will tend to emerge in some form during strong transits of Saturn, Rick observed. And Saturn represents boundaries, separation, division, constriction, contraction, among other things. So this is the onset of BPM2 in a high-dose LSD session. The subject had transiting Saturn opposition. This was actually Stan's, again, natal sun. So images of the fall from paradise can occur even in atheist journeyers. The incipient uterine contractions can be depicted as an attack by a monstrous octopus or spider, or engulfment in a whale. Images of hell from various cultures. Something like laboratory proof of Jung's theory of the collective unconscious. We can have images of these archetypal terrains and describe them in detail, even those with which we've never read about or heard about. We can identify with horrible suffering and victimization from all times and places, such as Jews in the concentration camps, or Africans in the slave trade, or Muslims massacred by the Mongols, or First Nations people dying of smallpox or genocide, and others. This is from a breathwork session. He had transiting Saturn square his natal sun, Tano Lenonen. He identified with an old woman wandering in a landscape of eternal pain and loneliness. We can identify with all genders in this work. That our spirit transcends gender, and so we can access the entire experience of humanity in these types of experiences. Now, Jean-Paul Sartre had a poorly managed and unresolved mescaline session in 1935, when transiting Saturn was conjunct his natal Saturn moon, his first Saturn return. Grof suggests that this poorly resolved session had a profound impact on his philosophy of existentialism, feelings of loneliness, guilt, and inferiority, fear of death and insanity, the horror of being trapped and engulfed, and a sense of the profound absurdity of life. This is almost like textbook description of BPM2. And in a way, humanity's been going through a powerful birth labor, and existentialism represented the kind of articulation of this particular stage in the process. So Eva Ursini, my colleague, drew this. Venus-Saturn transits can sometimes feel like this, where friendship, love, our feelings of lovability or attractiveness are being constricted as we relive this early stage of labor, Venus-Saturn. So from the individual side, states of separation and disconnection from the universal consciousness, entering the realm of time and materiality, mortality and finitude. Hell, the suffering of Tantalus or Prometheus, the dark night of the soul. Saturn is strongly connected, closely connected with the holotropic, or moving toward matter impulse in our psyches. This is the opposite of holotropic, moving toward wholeness. So moving toward matter. The suffering of BPM2 and BPM3 forms the basis of the unhealthy, paranoid, and fearful elements of our egos. Very powerful imprints of separation and suffering, and a need to defend ourselves. And I believe that these feelings then get projected out onto the world of people, of this sense of danger around us, or we need more living space, as Hitler put it, a sense of being compressed in. Hitler born with Mars square Saturn, and then, instead of doing the inner work to get that inner space inside, the old fashioned way was to then just try to find that in the outer world. So from the transpersonal side, the act of cosmic creation requires plays of opposites, such as light, dark, pleasure, pain. Through a process of self-forgetting and partitioning, the universal principle differentiates out parts of its own being into separate units of consciousness, which can interact with each other and with the universal principle in the countless dramas of incarnation. So Saturn represents states of duality, polarities. And this is what the tree of the knowledge of good and evil represented. We have to leave Eden. We have to leave the womb paradise in order to be born into the world, which is made of dualities. That's not a mistake. That is something that spirit wants to do, volunteers for that. It craves the adventure of incarnation. So, basic perinatal matrix 3, confrontations with the shadow side of human nature. Here, the cervix is now open and the fetus is being pressed through the narrow birth canal by powerful uterine contractions. Intense driving pressures and activation of powerful energies. And Rick found that Pluto transits, alignments of Pluto, correspond to these kinds of experiences, and then inflected by the other planetary archetypes interacting with Pluto. When people have strong Plutos and they're in a psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy session where there's permission to experience it, there can be volcanic, explosive discharges of energy and aggression. This is tremendously valuable. Stanley, do you have a question? Maybe at the end. I think he see his hand up there. There is a sense of there being a finite amount of suffering, feelings of moving toward light at the end of the tunnel. Now, Stan found that people working through BPM-3 memories in their psyches can experience a sense of titanic fight and activation of aggression. Enormous aggressive response is activated in the fetus by the life-threatening situation that it's in. And this, because it can't fight back or scream or leave the situation, these energies are jammed back into the musculature of it and cells of its body. And it sits in the psyche like a kind of powder keg. And then this comes out in violent situations such as wars, revolutions, and criminal, like violent acts. It's very important that we work as a civilization now to try to unpack these energies within ourselves. Because the oxygen carrying blood supply to the umbilical cord of the fetus comes from arteries wound through the uterine walls. Every time there's a uterine contraction, that cuts or diminishes the flow of oxygen to the fetus. And this is experienced as suffocation. That is the life-threatening part of the birth process. We know that choking creates a kind of enforced sexual arousal, and Stan found that in his patients there could be sadomasochistic feelings that would emerge when they were reliving this as part of their birth. This is a very telling kind of image of this, very much kind of recreating the perinatal situation here in this kind of masochistic side of the gestalt. The sadist would be get enjoyment from inflicting pain, the masochist from receiving it. But both are part of the same gestalt of the related to the mother and the fetus, where they could be inflicting great pain on each other in certain stages of labor. Yeah. Jim? Oh, sorry, heard something. Now, people can also have experiences referred to as demonic. The problem of evil and the relationship between good and evil can emerge in people's sessions. There can be confrontations with negative archetypal energies or wrathful deities. And now it's interesting, H.R. Giger, the artist, was born with Pluto square Mars Saturn, and he had an uncanny ability to depict the nightmarish world of the perinatal matrices. These are the kind of images people see under heavy Pluto transits at times. Now, people can also have scatological experiences. People can have images of wallowing in excrement or confrontations with repulsive biological materials. There can be nausea, and projectile vomiting is a very important component of people's experiences at this stage of labor. And then finally, passing through purifying fire, terms pyrocatharsis. The fire has magical qualities. It purifies everything that is rotten and corrupt in our souls and prepares them for rebirth. This is from an ayahuasca session. She had transiting Pluto conjunct her natal sun. So images of volcanic eruptions. These are the kind of forces that feel like are being pressed out of us in breathwork sessions or psychedelic sessions under strong Pluto transits. Blasting rockets. This would be Mercury Pluto, a sort of obsessive thinking about shadow material, getting carried away with sort of aggressive ideologies and so on. Mercury Pluto alignments. Mercury's connected with communication and thought. Or Mars Pluto, this like we have in the sky right now, this sense of raging sort of blood and guts, thunder and lightning kind of violence. And it's very important that we do not aim this at each other, that we unilaterally withdraw from aggressive encounters and aim our aggressive energies at transcendence instead. To try to sort of, or we get a determination that we're going to overcome these patterns. We're going to go back to the divine consciousness in our open that connection rather than just perpetuating these cycles of violence. So from the individual side, the death rebirth struggle of the ego, as we are forced to take responsibility for the entire range of human shadow emotions. We can identify with both victims and perpetrators in our sessions during strong Pluto transits. Archetypes include purgatory, volcanic ecstasy, and I said the sense of there being a finite amount of suffering. From the transpersonal side, the endless processes of cosmic change, the unleashing of powerful energies and emotions in order to thicken the plot of the cosmic drama and keep it interesting and entertaining. This is how in mystical states we can sort of get a perspective on why the divine might create Pluto. Why does it have Pluto in the universe? And partly seems to be to keep things moving and interesting. I've about 5 more minutes, so I hope I'm okay for time. So Pluto's intense driving energy, such as during the suffering of birth or acted out encounters in human life, which deeply wound us and send us further from the divine source, can be holotropic. Pluto can be very wounding and damaging at certain points when we encounter the energies acted out. But Pluto's action can also be powerfully holotropic, such as during the dramatic releases of energy and emotion during breathwork or psychedelic sessions, as our inner traumas are released. Pluto can jam trauma into us, but it can also press trauma out of us. And this is essentially what's happening in deep psychotherapy. We're unpacking trauma that we couldn't fully feel at the time, allowing us to fully experience it, and then it is released and consumed. And then BPM 4, a profound sense of decompression, opening and awakening as the fetus crowns and then escapes the life-threatening birth canal. Ecstatic feelings of rebirth, renewal, redemption, and forgiveness. People access intrinsic human values of planetary citizenship and universal brotherhood, sisterhood. Rick found that the archetype Uranus, planetary archetype Uranus, is connected with these states of rebirth and breakthrough. And Stan's research suggests that, like the Buddhists say, when we remove the arrow of suffering, compassion follows automatically. The generic state of human consciousness is more loving, more tolerant, more cooperative, more happier, more connected with nature and natural cycles, that the pathology that we see acted out in the news and on the world stage are the results of trauma, deep trauma, like perinatal trauma. And I believe that is the way forward for humanity. The psychedelic renaissance and other techniques will allow us to get ahead of the wave of destructive behaviors, such as climate change and the threat of war. So moving toward light is very moving back toward the light here. There can be celestial choirs, images of peacock feathers or spectra patterns, the inside of giant halls and cathedrals that depict the enormous decompression and opening of space. The end of wars or revolutions, or the discovery of medicine that can benefit all sides in a conflict. The fall of the Berlin Wall during the great Uranus-Neptune conjunction. I think this was 89. Being held in the hands of the great mother goddess. We can identify with the death and rebirth of deities such as Osiris, or Dionysus, or Persephone, or Christ. We can reconnect with the great mother goddess in the form of Isis, Demeter, Lakshmi, or Parvati, or Mary. Or with God, we can have a sense of reconnecting with the good side of God, the Father, archetype, or the divine in a more abstract form, such as radiant light. This is a breathwork session. She had transiting Uranus opposition her natal sun, explosive transcendence of boundaries. And this is one of Stan's sessions. He had Uranus Pluto of the 60s square his natal Venus. You can see he's going through the purifying fire. Here's his mother's spine, and he's moving out into the realm of the peacock mother goddess. He thought it was Saraswati. Just about one more minute here. Sort of reborn love, reborn beauty, reborn sense of friendship. With Mars, that was Venus-Uranus. With Mars-Uranus combinations, a sense of reborn energy, reborn enthusiasm, or transcendence of old patterns of aggression. Ecstatic breakthroughs back into the universal consciousness beyond the fear of death. And then from the transpersonal side, this is the holotropic force which pulls consciousness out of its immersion in material form and back toward divine wholeness and self-awakening. Reborn deities, the cosmic midwife, how I think of Uranus. This is just as much a feminine archetype as masculine. Uranus, they all are actually. They can be both feminine, masculine, or they can transcend gender. This is the reconnection with the mother in BPM4, Eva Ursini and Stan Grof hybrid drawing. And then here's the entire sequence. I won't read these, but then the even deeper category are transpersonal experiences. And you can come back and look at this, but these are the major categories of transpersonal experiences people can access. Additional healing can come from these. Jim, I could present one more small sequence that would take me about 2 more minutes. How am I doing for time?
You have time? Please take the next 2 minutes, and then
okay.
We'll have a discussion.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. So I want to introduce one more concept, Stan's idea of systems of condensed experience, or coex systems. He found that when we enter holotropic states, our memories do not surface randomly, but tend to emerge in clusters of memory, which are bound together by a similar emotion or sensation. He calls these memory groups coex systems. And coex systems can have components from the biographical layer of the psyche, and then they can have perinatal components. And then the deepest roots of some of our symptoms might be a past life or a collective memory or the consciousness of a specific animal or an archetype. And we have to work successively back through the whole layer, the layers of the coex system to get to the deepest root. And then the astrological correlation is sex. If we are under the influence of a coex involving great suffering, such as punishment during childhood, a long and complicated birth, and a difficult past life memory, we will tend to feel anxious, depressed, and pessimistic in our present life situation when these memory systems are influencing us. But later on, the flashlight of consciousness might switch over to a positive memory system, one based in happy times in family life, blissful womb memories, peaceful periods in our racial history, or and a nourishing and supportive archetype. When we're under the influence of this memory system or coex, we will tend to feel happy, sense of well-being, optimism, and safety. Now, Rick Tarnas discovered that these coex systems in our unconscious correlate with major planetary alignments in our birth chart. Memory systems involving experiences of abandonment, ridicule, or judgment are often reflected by difficult aspects involving Saturn. Further, rejection by the mother will tend to correspond to Saturn moon alignments, whereas problems with the father to those of Saturn sun. Of course, moon Saturn and sun Saturn aspects also have many positive sides. That we could have a solidly enduring and dependable relationship with our mother or father. They don't necessarily indicate trauma when we see it in a chart. And then finally, he observed that the transits, the planets in the sky now interacting with our natal planets will tend to activate the memory systems associated with that aspect. If we have a coex involving abandonment and lack of nurturing related to a natal moon square Saturn, for example, we will tend to feel the emotions related to that coex surfacing whenever a powerful transiting planet lights up our moon Saturn square. These will also be times when we can do the deepest work to resolve the issues related to those memories. So this is a very powerful way of seeing astrology and understanding astrology, why the dynamics in our psyches change over time, because we're being influenced by different memory systems within us based on the transits. And then this is my second last slide here. Patriarchy is the 5,000-year birth canal of the great mother goddess. And he felt that the new humanity is crowning before our eyes. A better side of us is trying to emerge in each human being. And then finally, the cosmic mother, Karen Motan, this sort of birth of the new earth, a new level of connection. So this is a course I'm offering. You can go to my website if you want online course starting in September, and then our YouTube channel, ANN, and then our website, archetypalnews.net. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Wren. That was a program full of information and deep psychological insight into the complexities of the womb experience and how that relates to our individual experiences after birth. A number of questions have come through the chat. I'll just bring them in. A number of people were wondering about the effect of what you're talking about if there's, for example, twins or triplets or a cesarean section and the birth in some way is an anomaly. How does that impact the processes that that Stan and Rick and all of you are developing?
Well, Stan worked with some people who were twins, twin situations, and this would be part of the BPM-1. So there could be a sense of powerful spiritual connection with the other soul, or that part of the universal soul that's incarnating with you in the womb as your twin. Sometimes there can be competition for resources and who's born first, things like that. Caesareans are very significant. In an emergency cesarean, the pattern would be essentially the same: the loss of the womb, and then the no exit stage, and then probably the dynamic stage of labor, and then because of the baby gets stuck or some kind of emergency, then a medical intervention. So the pattern is basically the same. Vaginal delivery creates a deep sense that we can overcome difficult situations, that we can go through traumatic events and survive them, a deep ingrained optimism. But with an elective cesarean, Stan suggests, we go right from the nourishing, all-containing womb into the delivery room, which is much worse than the conditions in the womb. There's hot and cold, there's hunger and thirst, wet and dry, and so on. We enter the realm of duality. So there can be some of the things that sort of a disappointment in the world for elective cesarean. People, though, have less trauma, less birth trauma, so they may have easier access to spiritual states, he found. They may also tend to relate to the whole world as if it is a womb, because that memory is still close in their psyches. And then if it doesn't respond like a nourishing womb, then they can then sort of retreat back into their shells. They may not have the same endurance and perseverance as someone who went through the normal vaginal delivery. So those are just some of the things. Much more research needs to be done with this. He didn't actually, in his clientele, the people he worked with, I don't think there were actually any cesarean births at that time. So this has been more recently.
Mm-hmm. And then Richard Page has a very intriguing question. He says that in Jung's Red Book, there's a depiction of the war god Thor. Then a later caption that states, "You need war. Goodness of itself cannot dispel good." Does this possibly mean that the immense energy I direct towards appearing as good to mommy and seeing daddy as bad actually does harm? Would it be better to serve the whole of me? And the question is, my wars, is that something that is archetypally sort of part of the overall scheme?
Well, it certainly has been in our history and in the natural kingdom. I mean, there's a side of nature which is brutal, right? There's a side to it, but it's just at that moment when one animal eats another animal. Then the rest of the time it's peaceful. So these are just short, intense moments in an overall kind of peaceful situation. I don't think we can ever get rid of the aggressive energy that is in the universe. These archetypes do exist, but it seems to be just as satisfying to the gods and goddesses, to the universal mind, for us to experience those violent archetypes in sessions as it is to act them out in the world. I don't believe that we can sort of personally pray our way toward peace. I don't think it hurts. It's a bonding, it's a commitment, it's an intention. These are very important. But in depth psychology, as he's alluding to, I think we have to get in touch with the shadow side. And we get in touch with your inner Putin, get in touch with your ruthless dictator. Like, no one's going to threaten me. I would rather destroy the enemy than be threatened. get in touch with that in psychotherapy, and that, I believe, that can help a lot.
Yeah. And then a couple more questions are coming in about the birth process. One from Marie-France Lepage. What about breach or the use of forceps and near-death experiences of the mother who never resolved her feelings of rejection?
Well, all of these
stillborn births and so forth and so on, these anomalies that happen around birth, that what you described as normal, and people are just sort of asking about the anomalies.
Yeah, I guess norm is not the best term, the usual pattern. Yeah, they all have a profound effect, and people can unpack and work through those memories. And it's very important to feel all sides of it. We can access the feelings of our mothers. This is one of the meta healing avenues when our self-exploration reaches the perinatal layer of the psyche. We can have tremendous compassion for our mothers and what she went through. We can feel like it was hard for her to carry us. The birth was a traumatic shock for her because it ripped open her psyche to her own perinatal memories. Suddenly she's reliving her own birth at the same time that she's giving birth to us. And this can really help our relationships with our mothers a lot and lead to forgiveness and ability to be forgiven. Yeah.
I was just made me think of my own mother, and off in West China, and there was no doctor or midwife, and she just stood beside her writing desk and birthed me herself. And one of the results, I think, of that birthing process was a deep bonding between us that never broke. She lived for 95 years, and we loved each other, and I was holding her hand when she died. And so I think I would be an example of a birth process where the bonding really was intense.
That's beautiful. Wow.
But let me ask you a deeper question about this whole birth process and the matrices, in light of evidence that has been emerging about transgenerational trauma and impacts. Because I think that, even as Freud and Jung started after birth, Stan took it into the uterine process. If you know the work of Thomas Hubel or Gabor Mate and others, there's now very powerful evidence that the grandmother and the mother and the daughter are all bonded in a process, and essentially the sins of the father are visited unto the children of unto 7 generations. So what would you say about the process of archetypal influences that actually come into the womb experience, but predate the womb experience for an individual?
Yes. When you're reliving these various stages of labor, they can open out into many transpersonal streams, which are feeding in to every tiny nuance of that birth situation. You can have a sense of, a toxic womb environment in BPM1, and then it opens out into a negative past life memory. What you're talking about are ancestral memories, and this is a very important stream which can sort of feed into the qualities of our births. And also we can directly experience conflicts and traumas in the lives of our parents, our ancestors, all the way back to phylogenetic ancestors. But then we can also access racial memories. These would be more like closer cousins, you could say. But we additionally have access to the entire experience of humanity. So sometimes our symptoms could be related to something that happened for a human group that we are not related to. They're not a racial memory. If you go far enough back, they would be, common African ancestors. But all these transpersonal streams are important. And in the approach that Stan has developed, the role of the guide or the therapist is to allow a person to enter the holotropic state and let their own inner healer direct the process. It might go to something that happened in childhood, and then it could go to something in birth, and then a ancestral memory, then a consciousness of the first fish that came out onto land. And we don't know what's going to happen or even what should happen in therapy. So it's important to allow the entire range of experiences. So,
yeah. And then Sarah Klepner is just asking a question around the fact that you referenced headlines as an indicator of trauma, the expression of violence as a result of the feeling of being trapped in the womb, hearing your call for confronting the shadow in therapy. Is there no societal level intervention, treatment, or medicine? Timothy Leary and others talked about closing power brokers, dosing power brokers in the 1960s. So this is a question about how we manage therapeutically the transformation of our wombs.
I'm not totally clear on what she's saying. Power brokers. If she means healing other people, we can really only work on ourselves. And as I said, we have to get in touch with those structures within our own psyches. We can have a powerful subjective sense that we're helping to heal the world through our own healing. It's impossible to prove it, but it can be very convincing. You could feel like you're working through karma between two different racial groups based on some terrible war that happened. You're helping to allow humans to live in harmony with nature now. You're participating in the birth of the new paradigm. You're not only reducing the level of fear and aggression and greed in your own psyche, you're also helping the world around you, not only directly through the way you live, but sort of through the collective unconscious. You're reducing tensions and pressures in the collective psyche. So, I'm not sure if that addresses that.
Yeah. And I think that the point that you're making about how the individuals are connected to the collective, the ancestral, you can feel it playing out in many ways in the Ukraine, as you were pointing out earlier, that the Russian collective psyche is highly sensitized to invasion. Most Americans there's never been an invasion of the United States, at least not since 1812, when the British came in and sacked Washington. We have no collective memory of that. So the psychology of our memories affects the political actions that we take in relationship to our collective memories. And they predate our current contemporary awareness in unconscious ways that we don't understand, but are nevertheless powerfully real.
Right. Europeans have been killing each other in large numbers for a very long time, and so many other parts of the world too, if not every part, almost every part. It's not only the historical traumas. The perinatal discovery suggests that we're all preconditioned to be afraid of being in a peaceful situation and then losing it, that some force is going to come and break the water and contract around us and threaten our lives. So even if your country hasn't been invaded, there can still be a high degree of fear, of aggression, and we need to allow people who want to do that work to unpack those traumas, those memories from their psyches.
And then finally, Wren, just because you're familiar with these things and started the program with sort of an astrological reading, as it were, of our contemporary situation, as you look over the next month or two, from a planetary alignment point of view, do you see a pathway of transformation? Are the planetary alignments going to become even more contradictory? What would you say just over the next 30, 45, 60 days? What's in store?
There's no short answer to that. And there's a wide range of possibilities. I wish I could give just good news about Ukraine. I'm certainly not saying it's bad news. We don't know as astrologers. There's certainly an activation of brutal energies. One possibility is that Putin's going to go for it. He's going to decide to become the Terminator archetype. That is one possibility, but he probably still wouldn't succeed in his goal because the Ukrainians will probably not give up. But I hope that doesn't happen. I think it's important that we keep doing our inner sessions when we get a chance. See what your inner healer can do. See if you can get in touch with some of those Russian traumas that are supporting these kind of behaviors. Get in touch with some of the historical conflicts between the Catholics and the Orthodox churches, which is one of the stresses in that part of the world, between the Germans and the Russians, the Germanic and the Russian people, and so on. That can help a lot. I want to be optimistic too, but it's a scary situation.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, Wren, thank you so much for your extraordinarily comprehensive intelligence today. And you've made Stan and Rick's contributions to the intellectual history and psychology of humankind available to us in a very understandable way. So I want to thank you for it. And we're honored to have you as a doctoral student at Ubiquity University, and look forward possibly for you to come back on Humanity Rising down the road. Everyone is now welcome to join the after chat session. You'll see the link in the chat box. Wren, you are more than welcome to join. You received the link yesterday. And then tomorrow, everyone, we're going to have Jean Houston with us, and Annalos Smitman, who together have been producing a trilogy on the avatar of the future of humanity. And we had them, about 6 months ago, talking about volume 1. They are now going to talk to us about volume 2, which has synchronistically as its theme, the healing of our wounds. So that's tomorrow on Humanity Rising. This concludes our session for today. I want to thank everyone. Wren, you've been brilliant and amazing. And that brings our session to a close. Bye for now, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Wren.